lessons that I have learned, but there were still a few I feel that were probably missed out. That should have probably been involved in either our curriculum or in some way or the other. And that is exactly what we are going to discuss here today. So that is what we weren't taught in school. With us, we have a very talented panel. Let's start with the introductions of the youngest member of the panelists. That is Ehsan. He's a VPE of TCS Maitri Toastmasters Club. He's a tech guru. Ehsan.
Thank you, Neha. I'm very excited to be part of this, especially to share the panel with elite and experienced Toastmasters like Ranga and Samir. It's definitely an honor. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me, and I hope you're doing well. Next, we have an IT project manager, an environmentalist, and a dad. None other than Ranganathan Ramani. I'll henceforward be referring to him as Ranga. Ranga.
Thank you.
Ranga, how are you?
I'm good. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Neha.
And our third panelist is a swimmer. He's the 46th Indian to cross the English Channel, and a dad, Samir Patil.
Thank you, Neha, for the wonderful introduction. Thank you for inviting me today as a part of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Samir, for joining. I hope you didn't face any awkward questions today with your son.
No, I thought Ranga was the youngest one, but
he still is actually.
Yes, he actually.
Me and Arvind just got out of another meeting where we made a ground rule that using words like sir and uncle are banned.
There won't be any sir and uncle in this panel discussion for sure. So to begin with, I would want to know what is that one thing. This question is to all three of you, Samir, Ranga, and Ehsan. What is that one thing, that one subject that is still not taught in school, something that school should introduce to young kids, and you think it's high time it being introduced now? Like if anyone of you would like to go first. Samir, maybe.
Okay. Ehsan, should I think you raised that?
Yes, go ahead, Samir.
Okay, thanks, Ehsan. So one of the important skills, and it comes under whole gamut of soft skills, is collaboration. Now, collaboration is the word which we use as a keyword in a lot of places, but it is not just a keyword, it's an important life skill. And I'll tell you by some examples, as in the schools, at least where I was, most of the times we were compared with each other's on the basis of our marks. So at any given point in time, we are competing against each other, right? But when you are working, when you are in the work environment, you have colleagues. Now, what happens most of the times is when you switch from a professional environment, switch to a professional environment, you have to work with a lot of people, and it's kind of evident in every other area also. Say, for example, if I am good at say back-end skills, somebody is good at front-end skills, then I have to collaborate with them. In fact, in the scientific world also, right, there is a lot of switch. Say Newton was just sitting alone under the tree, and then he was able to discover gravity. But in today's world, there is a whole CERN scientist working with each other, discovering the God particle, hundreds and hundreds scientists, thousands of scientists interacting with each other. The collaboration is really important. Whereas in schools, we are pitching kids against each other to perform better. I mean, that's one way to make people a good survivor, but I feel that collaboration is also an important skill that should be taught as a part of, say, and one of the ways doing it, like, say, for example, Ehsan is very good in the maths, Ranga is very good in the English, and I'm not good at either of them. Then rather than competing with me, Ehsan and Ranga should help me out.
I completely agree. Collaboration is very much an important life skill, which like without collaborating, it is very difficult. Rather than pulling each other down, it should always be helping each other grow by collaborating, and so that all of us can grow. Ranga, if you would like to state one thing that you think should have been taught in
Yeah.
school.
I think Samir put it very well. We all been always been taught how to compete rather than how to collaborate, which is more essential. But anyway, he has already said that. So the next important thing that comes to my mind is we still don't teach our children how to take risk and overcome the fear of failure. If you ask me, that's one thing we need to teach our children. Young children are used to even when they start walking from crawling stage, they keep falling and getting up, and that's how they grow. By excessively focusing on success, somewhere along the line, we are really making them devoid of the true experience of learning, and which later on becomes, in a sense, the school education, at least during that period we were studying, all formed a more colonial style of education system, which was required for these colonial masters to create good amount of clerical positions. That's one thing that comes to my mind. After collaboration, I think the biggest thing that we miss teaching our children is how to take risk.
I guess if our kids are more comfortable taking risks, they will also be more comfortable with failures, because risks many a times come with failures. And also the success will be more sweet, since they know that they are taking that risk to get that success. Thank you, Ranga, for pointing that out. Ehsan, if you would like to comment on it.
One skill that I would like the students of today to learn is how to channel information in this world. So today you see information is everywhere. We work in an information technology, IT industry, and it's everywhere. So, and there's a huge, there's a team of people who are spreading fake news and not the right ones that should actually reach the people. So I would really see in the upcoming months or years that students from now who are in the school, they be taught how to channelize the right information and the wrong information, and how valuable information is. So that is one thing that I definitely look up to in the future.
Wow.
Yes,
That's amazing observation.
It's very much.
Thank you, Samir.
I also seen, Ehsan, you are very much vocal about a lot of current affairs, and I feel that for you to have a better understanding of the current affairs, it is and to channel the right information, it is very much essential to know what has happened, what is the history behind it.
Yes.
To differentiate between the truth, the fact, and the fake news. I remember in school, our history syllabus used to end at "and India got independence." So what do you think, the way we are taught history in school, how do you think has it impacted your understanding of current affairs? And do you think if the after independence history should be included?
History, when we see history as an opinion, that's where this entire question comes up of whether history should be a subjective thing or it should be facts. So when you remove those glasses of bias, and when you remove those one-sidedness, when you look back at history, that's when history is simply a fact. It's a series of events, it's a series of discoveries that have come up, and it's a fact. So when you realize that it's a fact, that's when the actual history comes up. And I would wish, and I would want, the current education system to also include history as a fact and not as an opinion.
Given that it, of course, history should be put in across as facts and not from someone's opinions. But for you to have opinion, you need that background of a lot of history. When are teaching kids history, many times, that's what I said also, it's before independence, and India got independence is where our history classes end. Do you think the kids should have a more idea about what happened after independence? And there is so much that has happened after independence that actually affects how our current affairs are going on.
Yes, definitely. So, when we got the independence, that's when we became democratic, a complete democratic of our own. When we started having our own laws, when we started having our own constitution, we've had our own people come up as ministers, as prime ministers, as democrats and diplomats who represented us as Indians to the rest of the world. So it's highly important that we definitely include those parts as well, and those events and those facts in the history, so that going forward we'll probably have much better leaders, and leaders who are not biased, and who are very capable of representing us and leading us.
That is true. I also that's something I hope to see in the future syllabus of our younger kids. Sameer, Ranga, if you would have anything to add on to what Hassan said, or if you have just mind off, please go.
There you go. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
Isam made it very clear. I think I just want to add to that. History is best studies. There are two types of learning, right? One is formative, another one is normative. The second one is, when I say normative, we put a goggle and say this should have been the judgmental view. The formative is basically put a divide of any goggles or any pre-filtered opinions and approach it as why things happened the way it was. In my opinion, the history should always be taught with that. Just present the facts to the students and let them form their interpretation instead of trying to give a particular picture. Maybe pre-independence, colonial masters had their own way of writing for suiting their purpose. But today we are a democratic country, like Isam said. I think we should present the facts, allow the students to form their opinion. That's how they develop their skills to grow as they move in future. I think formative way is the right way to do, not the normative thing, which are somehow, unfortunately, slipping into, I would say.
Also, stating them just facts would empower them to make their own opinions, which would also help not just in current affairs or something, but also other things, in forming their own opinions with the given facts. That is also one skill that they would develop by just stating them facts or not giving them opinions. Ranga, when I asked you the first question, you stated risk is something that younger kids should be taught. I remember when I was a kid, I used to play business with my mama, my mother's brother, and my brother. And he used to tell us a lot about finance and what is happening currently. And back then, one thing that I never understood, and I asked him very plainly, was how can a country go in debt? All they have to do is just print money. And now it sounds very much funny, but back then it was a very serious question: how can country go in debt? So, Ranga, I wanted to know if you think that how money works and how can you practically manage money should be introduced to kids at a very early age.
I think what is money, should we print money, how to manage debt is a very, very big topic by itself. I'm not a macroeconomic specialist, though I have dabbled with some courses in Coursera and other things. But come back to your specific question. Financial responsibility should start quite young, especially when, from the time when we grew up to now. A lot of things are taken for granted as we move on. And people don't know what is shortages in some area, so they don't never appreciate. There are people who don't really have some of them which are easily available to us. So the sense of taking everything for granted gives a false entitlement as children grow up. Instead of how often the parents tell them, make them sit as they grow up and explain the responsibility of how to live within a certain money. I mean, it's not a question of how much amount, whatever you give. I mean, ask them to calculate and plan. Those of who go to hostels and they somehow get that opportunity, but people who are who are day scholars, they do not have that opportunity. And I believe the financial responsibility should start quite early in life. I mean, allow the children to take responsibility for where they spend. Even if it's a monthly, weekly budget, they have to plan. How much, whatever money we give them, they should account for it and be responsible. It's not about restricting them on they should buy this, not buy this, but allow them the freedom and allow them to learn by actually taking the responsibility for whatever they are spending for. And that financial responsibility should come quite early. If you do that, then as the child grows up, when it becomes adult, he becomes responsible from day one. Even when the day he starts earning his money, he knows how much is discretionary spending, how much is that something he can go ahead and save, and what is essentials. So the clarity will come quite useful. Most of most of us probably we are by the time we realize it's a little late and probably we miss quite a lot of opportunity in savings or taking financial responsibility.
We spoke about savings. When we talk about savings, a lot of it come into investments and knowing about those channels of investments. Do you think should kids also be introduced to those channels of investments that are there? For example, very small things that they can maybe do as a kid as well, having a fixed deposit when they are just putting in some money or something in that way. What do you think should they be introduced? And how
I
can they
agree.
be?
As school children, we all have played the Monopoly game. I don't know whether is it any more popular. Children are more on the video game. Monopoly was actually a good way of teaching. I have this much fun. Can I invest here? Should I invest or splurge now? Those kind of questions are really answered it with the paper money, which is literally a coin. Plastic coins are used, but it gives a sense of idea that either you can spend now or save it for future. That balance comes in. Uh, so it's not about how much you can save. Basically, help this help the students to take responsibility and then postpone what they can and then spend on what they think is essential. That balance has to come in. There's no fixed rule saying that you have to save this much or spend this much. And macroeconomics, everybody only saves, then there is no growth.
No,
Everybody spends also, there is no growth because somebody need to provide for finance of capital. So there is no fixed balance, but everybody must take that decision responsibly based on their comfort.
definitely. Thank you, Ranga, for sharing your opinion. Samir, there is one thing that I feel is common between you and me. That is, we both love swimming. I remember when I was in 5th standard, my mother used to forcibly take me back then to the pool to make me learn how to swim. It later so happened that started liking it. But I feel that I want to be a swimmer. It's not a very easy conversation, especially to have with Indian households, within Indian households. It's a very unconventional path of career that one might want to choose. Not just with swimming, but many other unconventional paths of careers that we have. Do you feel that we need a class at some point in our schooling that educates us on what all are the arenas that a student can explore and choose from? And if you feel that there is a gap there which needs to be filled.
Right, that's a very valid point, Neha. So growing up, there is a classic line. We are told that you are either a doctor or engineer or a failure. Now, these were the given options. But I will, so my background is slightly different, as in I grew up in a small town, Alibag, and I did not I did not know about a lot of options. In fact, I did not know about IIT till I took admission into engineering. And that did not mean I would have gotten into IIT. I'm not claiming that. But it's just that I did not know that there are options like ISC Bangalore or IIT. And yes, so there are plethora of options right now available. See, I will tell you, I'll slightly take a reverse gear and I'll talk about it. That the economy has changed a lot since 1990s, and there has been huge switch from there was a huge growth. There is a huge spurt of economic activity in Indian context that has happened after the Indian economy opened up for the foreign investment and the privatization. And that is one of the important history event that should be taught in the schools. Okay, that has changed our fortune a lot as a country and as a individuals also. We see a huge difference in our economic. So at that time when I was in the school in 80s period, at that time there were not much of a career options, but as I can see, there are a lot of options available for the kids. So for example, I'm giving my son options. So he is pursuing his hobby as a badminton, and when I say pursuing, he's actually playing badminton for 4 hours a day, which is a huge time. I mean, he is not able to spend that much concentration on the studies. Now I know at this point in time, if he's not a successful badminton player, he might be able to spend his time as a coach. So there are a lot of career opportunities for him that I identify as an also. Time has changed, and the opinion of individuals have also changed. We can see due to internet, availability of the internet, we know right now there are a lot of options available. It's not just the engineer, either engineer or doctor or a failure thing. You have huge number of options available. In fact, it's in terms of photography, in terms of travel, in terms of medical field, there are many opportunities available, and we are kids and parents as well as schools, they are all aware of those options. And yes, I think that time had changed a lot since I was a kid, and I feel there are a lot more options and people are aware of it. So it's a positive thing. I feel that way.
You said that parents, schools, we all are aware due to the internet that all the options that are available.
Yes.
But do you think that there is a gap in between schools knowing about those options and giving that knowledge to the younger kids that these are the options that are there, and don't fall into the conventional career path that are there, and giving the baton to them to choose what they want to do?
So when we are talking about schooling, we are talking about the age between at the max age of 15 or 14 to 15. Okay, now when you are in the school as a kid, when you are young, you form opinion when you look at someone. Say for example, when I looked at Sachin Tendulkar, I saw that he is the idol that I consider as an idol, and I formed my own opinion about my profession as I went along. As a school, it's their responsibility to cater to various subjects, as in geography, maths, science, history, anything that every kid may find. Every kid may not like every subject that is being taught in the school, but it's school's responsibility to expose them to as many subjects as possible and not just concentrate on a specific area. I feel that 14 is very young age for kids to form an opinion about a career. I feel that let them look around, see what is happening around, and then let them form the opinion. I mean, it's not, let us not put the onus of guiding 14-year kids into the career path, because that's let them understand what is happening around them. Like everybody is not Zuckerberg, right? They will start, they know, everybody is not a Bill Gates. They know from like 6 or 7 age of 6 or 7 that what they want to do. So I feel that it doesn't matter much in school if you are not, if you do not introduce you to the various professions. There is a plenty of time later where they can explore on their own. This is my opinion, obviously.
Yes, sir. But that is actually when you put it forward, I actually agree to it that 14-year age old might be too young for them to start focusing on one career path, and better just let them explore on all the career paths.
Right. Let us not put
very nice.
Yeah, let us not put all our eggs in one basket. That's how they put it, right?
Yes. Thank you so much, Samir. I want to move to Ehsan for my next question. So when I was in 8th standard, there was a huge change in the exam pattern that happened, and that was so that till 8th standard, all the students will be passed, and the pattern in which the exams were conducted were changed. I believe, Ehsan, you as a student also closely saw that change, either with your juniors or your seniors. And there have always been ongoing changes in the education system. Now we also have a new education policy. How do you think these changes are impacting students? Do you feel those changes have helped in any way in reducing the competitive nature of education?
To answer your last point, I believe it, rather than reducing, it has actually increased the competitive nature of exams and education, right? And yes, it definitely takes a huge toll on the students and especially on the teaching professionals. Usually for a teacher to adapt to a huge structural change like this, like from, when you have a set of guidelines for a long period of time and suddenly to have an overnight change, it is definitely difficult for them to adapt to it. Then talking about the point where you mentioned up till the 8th standard, people are automatically promoted to the next level, even if they're even if they did not perform well. I believe maybe not till the 8th, but at least the primary education should be like that, because at that point it should be more about creativity. It should never be about the competitiveness or aiming for excellence in everything that you do, let alone in studies and exams. It should be more about exploring what you like and what you don't like and your hobbies, and being free to enjoy your childhood.
That is very nice to put, that the when a young age is something you should be enjoying more than going in the competitive nature of the system. But then do you feel that when you're promoting someone for so long, would the competitive nature that is going to follow, as you said, it has not reduced, even though the kids are promoted till a certain age, it's going to take a heavier toll on them when suddenly they are forced to a competitive nature?
That is what I mentioned. Maybe not up till the eighth grade, because that is a very crucial point. What you learn in 9th and 10th, that's going to decide. That's going to play a major role on what career you're going to career path that you're going to follow. Like for example, the science and math concepts that I studied in 9th and 10th, they are still very relevant, and I've been using them till the point that I completed engineering. I recently completed engineering, and even in the aptitude tests that we have to give as for getting into any of the companies, those concepts were very, very important, and those were the ones that we were going back and brushing up. So maybe not up till that point, because that suddenly creates a bottleneck of pressure for the students to accommodate to this new structure. Maybe till the primary, they can be promoted, and they should be promoted. But beyond that, they should be a little bit of seriousness in some way or the other has to be introduced.
Thank you, Ehsan. Thank you so much for sharing that insight. I want to move to Ranga for my next question. Ranga, I remember when I was in school, there was a subject called environmental studies. But the attitude towards that subject was always, oh, it's not that important subject. Here's a question bank, read it, by heart the answers, give the examination next day, and that's it. So I wanted to know, what do you think? How can schools help us create in younger kids the need that is there for a conscious effort that has to be put in, that can be introduced to younger kids, so that from a very young age they are trying to protect it and are consciously putting an effort in it?
Yeah, you brought out a very relevant point, Megha. In fact, it's said that a man or a woman grows up to the year of 18, 20, and they stop growing. What they learn during this formative years or impressionable age continues for the rest of the life. So it's always catch them young and bring in the right principles. When we grew up, we never knew anything called green thing. I mean, I may look 80, but believe me, I'm not. But even those days, there's nothing called green thing. We never had plastic bag. If you buy anything to Kirana shop, he will pack it in a newspaper and give me. Right? And we never had plastic disposal, and whatever little food waste goes into garden directly. And there was nothing called garbage pile up on the streets. There are far few vehicles, and if you buy anything, it is a lifelong possession, whether it's a refrigerator or even a automobile, a scooter or a cycle. It's lifelong. But yeah, over the last 2 years, along with convenience, a lot of things have come up. It's important that we see how the global warming is shaping up. Everybody knows that. So please teach that responsibility in the quite early. In fact, a simple thing like today, which was quite common 30 years ago, what is perishable organic waste and what is dry waste and kitchen dry waste and wet waste. All those are very common. Today we need to teach them in the school. At least then they go back and tell their parents. Many parents don't know today that this is how, even in big societies where we live, people are all with good standards, similar standards of education and economic background, but people don't know how to segregate. They find it difficult, and I think some of the environmental consciousness should come quite early in life. And what better way than teaching that? In fact, many of the other things like physics, mathematics, chemistry, all those are taught. Of course, they are what people focus and say that's what will make you competitive, win competitive exam. But this gives you basic skills. If you miss this, achievement in everything else is actually becomes nothing. So as you rightly put it, I think social studies, responsibility, not just environment studies, even the traffic civic sense should be taught quite early in school. That's the only way to transform our next generation. I think it's a good opportunity. I hope government works on that very strongly.
That's really well said, Ranga.
Yes, I guess we can probably start by putting 2 dustbins in school, wet waste and dry waste, so that from a younger age, kids know what is wet waste and what is dry waste. They'll have that habit of doing it in the home as well, and it would be a step forward towards a green planet.
Even school, in canteen, when they eat or when they whatever food waste goes, they should be taught to put it in a garbage bin, which converts into organic. How can be used in the garden? That's how we need to convert. That's an opportunity to teach them quite early.
Yes, thank you so much, Ranga. Samir, even when I introduced you, I asked you a question like, I hope you didn't face any awkward questions today from your son. Samir, how do you think an inclusive, the question for anyone who did not get the reference was that what is gay was a question that Samir's son asked him. So I wanted to know, Samir, how do you think inclusivity can be added to the school curriculum, and what role can school play in kids identifying themselves with pride and without fear?
Okay, so let us define what do you mean by inclusiveness.
Inclusivity.
Right. So we are talking about people with the different, maybe caste, different religion, different gender. They are from different states and different nationality. So this is what we are talking about, the inclusiveness, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Is that what you meant, or is it something else
No, a lot. In general, everything: caste, religion, color, race, gender, how you identify yourself. In general, a lot of things that come under inclusivity. How can that be?
It's again. I feel that in our school, at least in our school, I don't felt that there was. I did not feel at that time that there was any discrimination on the basis of caste. Although the caste story was huge in being a small town, everybody were based on the surname. We knew who was of which caste, and there was this strong belief system that there is there are certain notions about the upper caste, there are certain notions about the lower caste, and there were certain notions about the fighter. There are Kshatriya caste and all those things. So those themes were very strong when, at least in a small town, and when everybody knew each other. But one good part, at least about our school, that I did not felt any discrimination by any teacher, by any authority in school. uh, and I felt that I was really fortunate. So something my school was doing really well on that side, and that front I felt. And when we talk about teachers, doctors, they are all considered as very noble profession, and it's a minimum sanctity, it's a minimum level of sanity if they can maintain while they are in school. That goes a long way when we are talking about the inclusiveness. I think our school did really well in terms of that, because once you are in the corporate world, nobody checks what is your religion, what is your caste, where you are from. They will just ask you questions about whether you can write XYZ thing, and what is your experience.
Your
So
skill set becomes your religion and your caste.
right, right, right. Uh, there is certain part, obviously, the sexuality and the that part, if I want to talk about, that's really a taboo subject which was never brought up when I was in the school, at least. And I the, we were very naive in terms of we forget about the female reproductive organs. We're not very sure about the male reproductive organs at that time. And we are even discussing that whether kissing produces babies or not. And this happened like in the 9th standard. And unfortunately, this is true, actually. So that kind of, I mean, hiding the information from kids, that's not good, I feel. And that's sometimes to the schools, and some partial responsibility lies on the parents also. So I feel that inclusiveness and the part where we are talking about some of the taboo subjects, that should be part of our school curriculum as well. And I feel that if the teachers maintain the minimum sanity, that will give us that will put us in a better shape. These are my 2 cents.
And also that it's a shared responsibility, not just with schools, but
Right.
also of parents.
Right. I agree.
Yes, thank you so much, Sameer. We have a few questions for the panel. I would like to take them. There's a question from Chinmay. It's a question to Ranga and Sameer. With virtual and online education becoming the norm, aren't we regressing in teaching the so-called life skills? Collaboration, teamwork, friendship, value of punishment, and so many more to the kids. Sameer, Ranga, who, if anyone would like to take up the question, it's for the both of you.
I will go first.
Yes.
Today, technology permits you to collaborate with not just with your neighbor or kids in the neighborhood. You can virtually collaborate with anyone. Well, the physical meeting is no more valid, but then you can collaborate virtually. So technology is not a limit. It doesn't limit you from collaborating. Also, it helps you to see how we can. I really believe that the online education system is the better way to do. And the innovation killer is not the online meetings. The real killer of innovation is, the so-called education system where you have to study all through the year, and then one fine morning you go with the exam and just vomit out everything, whatever you know, and based on that you decide. So that way we kill the innovation. But online education, in fact, many of the modern day, many of the new positions. In fact, there was recently a survey by Goldman Sachs in US, where at least 40% of the jobs do not require education degree, right? So if you remove the fear of marks, you are going to be selected by what you learn, what you can prove that you know. Like given TCS today, we are talking about national qualifier tests, which are much more innovative than a normal, exam result. So collaboration will follow in automatically in online education. It enables much better than the even limited classroom where you come across with a limited set of people. Here you can collaborate virtually with anywhere in the world, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity. I'm not sure whether
The online world opens up the option of collaboration even more. We should rather concentrate on changing the other things that are holding us back. Yes, Samir, I would you were saying something.
I have just one question for Ranga. Ranga, how old are your kids? Are they in school or in college?
Okay, so for your benefit, no kids.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so this is my experience with my son. He's 12 years old, and he's in 7th standard. What I feel is that yes, online world opens up a lot of new avenues for learning. But what I feel is that what my son craves for is that school time when they laugh, when they giggle with each other, when they probably kick each other, fight with each other, maybe. But that's all learning. I mean, there are some bullies, there are some kids who are teachers' pets. Some of them are really good at something, some of them are not. But it forms the whole herd. And when they are in the school, their physical proximity produces a different kind of responses than they are sitting in the like their parents, like me and my wife, are always hovering over what is like, why are you not listening to what your teacher is saying, while he is already thinking about dreaming about something else. But that's part of learning, I feel.
They're
And
getting
that's very much,
restricted in
yeah,
a
they are
way.
very,
In a way.
yeah, and they are craving for the physical proximity with other kids. I can feel that about my son. I mean, they
I would also like to say freedom. Maybe it's like, as you said, you and your wife are hovering over.
hovering over all the time. Like he has turned his laptop. He always turns his laptop in other way when either me and my wife are behind him. That's the one thing.
So
Okay,
that's a good question, Samir. I think. So who needs training now? I'm wondering whether the parents or the student.
Yeah, I think the privacy is a big thing that has come up in the COVID. Yeah.
We'll take another question that is from Tuba, and that would be the last question we'll be taking.
That's from Brilliant, actually. I've posted on behalf of Brilliant.
Okay. Thank you, Tuba, for the clarification. Rote learning is what kills creativity. What do you think can be done in India specifically to build a talent pool of creative and innovative thinkers? Ehsan, if you would like to add something on it.
So, what increases the creativity is the outlook where you're solving real problems. So, the opposite of rote learning, I believe, is when you recognize the real world problems and tries to think for solutions for that. So when we create an atmosphere or an outlook in the students that when you grow up, you're actually going to be faced with real world problems. It could be financial problems, it could be economic problems, it could be social problems. So when you start to channel them, their thoughts in the direction that they are going to actually solve these problems rather than rote learning, that's when this particular thing can be overcome.
Samir, Ranga, if you would like to add something on that.
I would like to add one thing. The creativity foster when we just don't give importance to the marks that are scored in an exam. And that is really happening right now, in at least in context of my son's school, I will talk. Say, for example, when my son participated in a badminton tournament for school and he represented his school, he was invited by the principal of the school So he considered it as an honor. He considered himself as a respectful person, and this fosters. And this is not just about the sports. A lot of children who show their talent in drawing exams, in chess, in all the other area, all the peripheral area, and not just the uh, exams. They were shown encouragement. They were given the trophies. So marks in the exam is not the only criteria to be successful in the life. That helps kid to explore other avenues for their growth, and that fosters the creativity is what I feel.
Removing the barrier of scoring, like so only scoring marks is what is going to
Right.
make you
That's a one
place
dimensional.
and
Yeah, that's just the one dimensional of stamping people of their
yes,
validity, and there are a lot of other ways, and that's basically is the creativity, isn't it?
yes.
Drawing, dance, art, crafts, everything is our part of personality, and there are various ways to
Encouraging them towards all these arenas other than, and not just asking them to focus on getting good marks, and encouraging them otherwise as well when they are doing something good in other activities as well. It's something I would increase and help them increase their creativity and focus on those areas. Thank you so much, Sameer. Thank you, Ranga and Ehsan as well, for sharing your opinions on a lot of
I was enlightened in few areas which otherwise I would not have thought about. And thank you, Neha, for including me.
Thank you, Sameer. I think there were a lot of opinions or a way of thinking that I had before this panel and before this discussion, but a lot of more ways to think on how, perspectives to think on is something I gained from this panel discussion. As Sameer said, maybe introducing kids with the career options from a very younger age is going to bond them into, okay, I have to do this, but rather that it's an age where you should be giving them an opportunity to explore more. That is something that I would be thinking upon surely. Ranga, the idea of making kids learn very basically how to segregate dry waste and wet waste, a very small step towards it. It's also going to take us like in this way of environment, protecting the environment, like more steps than we can imagine. Ehsan, your inputs on how the education system has changed and how it has affected, how your opinions have changed, how opinions have formed onto it is something. It was a very good insight to know on. I would again like to thank Ranga, Ehsan and Sameer, all three of you, for joining me today. If there are any closing remarks that any of you would like to add before we end the discussion.
Yeah, I think it was a wonderfully conducted thing. You brought in very relevant points. I hope in the limited time we were able to do justice, and all the best for your future journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ranga. Ehsan, if there's anything you would like to say before we end?
I thoroughly enjoyed, especially, to get the inputs from such experienced Toastmasters. Like I already said, it was really valuable, and all the best for your future projects as well, Neha. I really
Thank you. Thank you, Sameer, Ranga, and Ehsan. And on that note, I'll hand over the controls back to the Toastmaster for the day, Tuba. Thank you.
Thanks so much,